In the last lesson, we learned how to build our impacted risk model, ran a test risk analysis, and viewed our first distribution histogram. In this lesson, we will learn how to set up our risk analysis options and run a risk analysis based on the selected options. What we are going to do is analyze our pre-mitigated impacted risk plan. So if it is not already open, select File Open or File Open Recent to open the registered.epc pre-mitigated.plan. Now, before we run a risk analysis, we need to understand the risk analysis options. So click Risk Analysis Options from the top drop-down menu, and the Risk Analysis Options window will open. You can also access these options directly from the Run Risk Analysis window. If you click on the Risk Data tab, you will see that you have 6 data items that can be checked or unchecked. I usually leave Calculate Duration and Cost Sensitivity unchecked. This will allow your analysis to run more quickly. These can always be calculated later after running your analysis by right-clicking on an activity. Next, check the Calculate Risk Percentiles option. Then on the right, click the Percentiles button. A Risk Percentiles box will open. This is where we can define your own percentile fields such as start, finish, duration, float, and cost. For example, in the Type column, select the pull-down in the last field and highlight duration. In the Percentile column, type in 90 and press Tab on your keyboard. In the Task field, you will notice that you set up a user-defined P90 duration field. Tab across to the right, and this option allows you to add a distribution highlighter. Tab again, and you'll have the option of adding a probabilistic highlighter. Leave the last 3 fields as they are. Click Cancel to close this window and return to the Risk Data tab. The next option, Save Resource Data. This depends on the type of analysis, so if you have a resource-loaded model, you may want to check it. Leave it checked. Next, Save Probabilistic Cash Flow Data. If you want to generate the probabilistic cash flow chart, then you must check this option. Then, click the Cash Flow button. The Cash Flow Settings window will open. Here you can select which resources you wish to include. Most commonly, I would select labor. You could also define your own filters if you needed to. Click Cancel to close the Cash Flow Settings window and make sure it is unchecked. The last option allows you to save the net present value and internal rate of return. This option is dependent on the type of model you're running, but you probably won't need to use it. So when you look at all of these options, the first 2 would not be used very much, particularly because they will slow down the speed of your analysis. Generally, I would select Calculate Risk Percentiles and Save Resource Data, and only save probabilistic cash flow data if it were required. Now select the Analysis tab. The first option is the number of iterations you wish to analyze for. Currently, it is set for 1000 iterations. The number of iterations is usually set by the project team, depending on the project's statistical philosophy. I generally run between 1000 and 5000 iterations. If you look at the histogram, you will be able to determine the number of iterations required for convergence. Next, we can select the box to use Latin hypercube sampling. This is a slightly different sampling method that helps convergence to occur faster. If you uncheck the box, the analysis will use Monte Carlo for sampling, which is slower to reach convergence. The next option is Analyze until converged, or maximum iterations are run. If you like, you can set up a convergence metric, but usually you won't really use this option. However, in the earlier stages, it will give you a very good indicator of how many iterations are required to reach convergence. Next, I always like to keep the step-through analysis options checked, so you can watch how your simulation is progressing on a step-by-step basis. Make sure that the next option is checked. we want to set our own seed for the random number generator. Otherwise, the model will use the computer clock as a seed. So, if we ran the analysis a number of times, we would get slightly different results each time if we use the computer clock. Next, uncheck Restore all ignored tasks before analysis. So you would want to make sure that the ignored tasks are not ignored for the analysis. Then, uncheck Ignore correlation between risks. You could run two separate analyses to determine the task correlation difference between the checked and unchecked options. I usually leave the next option for resource leveling per iteration unchecked because this is very time consuming. It is not really that popular and is used very sparingly because it takes so much time to run, and we should question whether this level of detail is necessary for our analysis. Moving on, after analysis you can show different graphs, so let's just leave it as the distribution graph. You can change it later if you wish. Now click the Warnings tab at the top of the Risk Analysis options. Firstly, most likely is different to the deterministic. It warns us if our deterministic duration is different to the most likely duration. Usually we would use our most likely value. Next, deterministic value outside the risk distribution range. Usually we would use our most likely value. If the delta is significant, this is the time to go back and adjust our schedule. Next, risk is assigned to a task with an actual finish. This is not possible if it is finished. It cannot have a risk applied to it. Lastly, a beta-PERT distribution is symmetrical and a shape value has been entered. I usually leave this option checked. You can deselect any of the four options. For now, deselect the first two options, then click OK to close the Risk Analysis options window. Now we have set all of our risk analysis options. So click on Risk, Run Risk Analysis from the top drop-down menu. You can also click the Risk Analysis icon from the top toolbar or simply press F10. The Risk Analysis window will open. If you want to set any of your risk analysis options, you can click on the Option button to make any settings. Close the Risk Analysis options window to return to the Risk Analysis window. Leave the option for Show Step-Through Analysis checked. Also, let's show the distribution graph, so leave it checked as well. Now click the Analyze button. Then, press the Step button and it will run through one iteration. You will see iteration 1 of 1000. Step through a few more times to see the impact on the critical path with each iteration. If you then click Go, you will see all of the iterations carried out on a step-by-step basis, so you are able to watch their effect. You could also pause the analysis and perhaps add a filter to a selected activity, then continue with the analysis. So press Pause. Now at this point we could introduce a filter if we wished. So, for example, highlight the activity for Contract Process. Then from the top drop-down menu, select View Filter Task Predecessors, and you will see that only the task predecessors will be shown. Then select Go again and watch the progress. Pause the iterations again and this time select View Filter Task Successors. Only the task's successors will be visible. Press Go and continue with the filtered tasks. While the iterations are running, you can also cancel the filter by selecting the Ignore Filter icon in the top toolbar. Next, press Complete to finish the analysis. You could also click Cancel to abort the analysis. Click OK to save and exit the distribution histogram. In this lesson, we learned how to set up our risk analysis options and run a risk analysis based on the selected options. In the next lesson, we will discuss the distribution histogram. In the last lesson, we learned how to set up our risk analysis options and run a risk analysis based on the selected options. In this lesson, we will learn how to navigate and understand the distribution histogram. So now we have reached the point in our analysis where we can generate different reports and carry out some scenario modeling. If it is not already open, select File Open or File Open Recent to open the Register EPC Premitigated.plan file. Now, we must remember the purpose of risk modeling is to identify areas where the project could be going wrong. However, there is no point in only reporting on the bad points. We must come up with a plan to mitigate any potential problems. So the first chart that we're going to look at is the distribution histogram. So click on the Show Distribution icon in the top toolbar to open our previously saved distribution histogram. If you look at the top menus of the distribution histogram window, you will see that you have options such as export, copy, formatting, filtering, etc. And we will come back to some of them as we progress. On the left of our distribution histogram window, we will see all of our activities. If we click on any of the activities, we will see a histogram for that activity. Now, we want to look at our project completion milestone. So, highlight A011, Project Completion. Firstly, we must make sure that we understand the graph. There are two y-axes, and some people can find this to be confusing. The y-axis on the left is for the number of hits, and the one on the right is for the cumulative frequency. This simulation has had 1000 iterations. Now, if you look at the Tasks tab at the bottom left, you will see that the bar width is currently set automatically to a week. Let's change this to show the bar width as months. So now we'll have larger bars with each bar representing 1 month. Change the bar width back to weeks. Let's look at the tallest bar and trace it to see the number of hits. You will see that the bar has had 70 hits out of the 1000 iterations. Change the bar width to months and you'll note that the tallest bar has had approximately 280 hits out of 1000, and so on. So think of the bars as zones, and they will tell us how many hits ended up in each zone. Now at the bottom of the graph, you will see that there are different tabs for finish date, start date, duration, float, cost, etc. These tabs enable you to display your histogram in different ways, depending on the reporting requirements. We can also create histograms for resources. So click on the Histograms tab at the bottom left to view our resource histogram. So in the same way, we can look at costs or labor hours by highlighting the particular resource, say cost or labor. We read this histogram in the same way as the tasks histogram. Let's go back to our tasks histogram and set the bar width back to weeks. Each bar or zone will correspond to a certain number of hits, and the total of the hits will be 1000. Now let's look at the 80% level, or P80 level. What does this mean? The 80% confidence level means that 80% of my iterations would finish on or before that point. This is a very important point that we must remember, and we must be able to explain it to the project team. A very good way of viewing this is by adding a highlighter to our chart. We want to look at the delta between our deterministic date and our 80% mark. So, what we're going to do is show our P80 contingency. Before we do that, let's have a look at how we can format highlighters to help us in our analysis. From the top menu, select Format Highlighters, and the Highlighters window will open. We can also open this window by simply right-clicking anywhere in the graph window and selecting Format Highlighters. You will see the currently defined highlighters or arrows. Click the Add button at the bottom and a new highlighters line will appear. By default, it will have a percentage of 50%. Click in the percentage field and change the value to 10%. Click OK to close the window and you will see the new 10% highlighter on the graph and in the bottom window. Deselect it in the bottom window and you will note that it is no longer displayed in the graph window. Select the checkbox again to display our new 10% highlighter. Now let's open the Format Highlighters window again by right-clicking the graph and selecting Format Highlighters. This time we are going to add some shading to our graph that will show us our P80 contingency. Click the Add button to add a new highlighter. Then, in the Type field from the pull-down menu, select Shade Between Values. Leave the Value 1 field as percentile. In the Percentage 1 field, enter 80%. Then change the Value 2 field to deterministic from the drop-down menu. Let's give it a color, so click on the black color field and select a light color, say pale yellow. Now, under Description, name it as P80 Contingency. So, we will be shading the graph between the deterministic and 80% percentile. We will then see the delta between what I scheduled and what my 80% is telling me. Click OK to show our P80 contingency. So, the difference between what I scheduled and the 80% percentile is 113 days. Remember that everything in the shaded area to the left of the 80% point represents 80% of the iterations. We have an 80% chance of finishing on or before that date. So our 80% confidence date is 7th of May against our deterministic date of the 15th of January 2008. We only have a 2% chance of achieving that January date, and we will need an additional 113 days if we want to be 80% confident. Otherwise, we will need some mitigation strategies or even have to remove some scope. Now, we need to look at ways of mitigating this 113 days delta amount. So first, we should look at the inputs to see if any of them are wrong. If we cannot find anything wrong with our inputs, then we need to investigate ways of taking mitigating action. Before moving on, we should have a look at the information that we would like to display on the right of the distribution graph. Remember that too much information can be overwhelming and confusing for the project team. Right-click anywhere in the text window on the right-hand side and a small formatting window will pop up. Here we can format our statistics font, format our layout, copy statistics text to say Word or Excel, and copy the graph and statistics again to Word or Excel. Let's just click on Format Layout and a Format Layout window will open. On the left-hand side, if we deselect Show Task Free, no tasks will be displayed on the left of the graph window, so leave it selected. At the top, we can turn off the graph title if we want to. Then on the top right, we can show or not show our statistical data on the right of the graph window. Now, there are many statistical options that you could display, but I prefer to select the following because most people who look at our distribution graph will find the information to be meaningful. So, select Show Data, Show Iterations, Show Convergence. It's good to show the convergence so that we can confirm that the analysis converged within the number of iterations. Show minimum, show maximum, show mean, show bar width, and show highlighters. At the very bottom, we can elect to not show the controls on the distribution graph. Basically, this will hide the bottom part of the distribution graph window. Click OK to close the Format Layout window. Now, if we right-click anywhere in the graph window, a slightly extended list of options will open. The additional options will include Format Graph, Format Axes, Format Highlighters, we discussed this earlier, Export Graph Data, this exports the data as a CSV file, and lastly, Advanced Graph Settings. Click this option to open the plot window. Here you will find many settings for changing the look of your graph, and I recommend that you experiment with the settings if you wish to. Close the plot window. Let's look at the highlighters control at the bottom left of the graph window. You will see that all of the highlighters that we have defined in the Format Highlighters window will be displayed here. In this box, we can deselect any of the highlighters on our graph. At the top of this box, there is a highlighter called Selected with a percent value. So let's select 70% on our histogram, and you will see that the highlighters box tells us that we have selected 70%. Deselect it to turn this value off, and it will no longer be visible in the graph window. Now in the bottom right-hand corner of the graph window, there are two buttons for Add to Distribution Analyzer and Show Distribution Analyzer. These controls are also available from the top graph menu by clicking Tools, Show, or Add to Distribution Analyzer. So as a quick example, let's select A130 Risk 4 and add it to the Distribution Analyzer. Let's select a second activity, A130 Risk 9, and again add it to the Distribution Analyzer. Then click Show Distribution Analyzer. Here you will see that the selected information is now displayed as S-curves side by side, and this is where we can start to run scenarios to mitigate any negative information that we have identified. Click Cancel to close the Distribution Analyzer window. Then click OK to save and exit the Distribution Graph window. So, in this lesson, we learned how to navigate and understand the distribution histogram. In the next lesson, we will learn how to navigate and understand the tornado chart. In the last lesson, we learned how to navigate and understand the distribution histogram. In this lesson, we'll learn how to navigate and understand the tornado chart. If it is not already open, select File Open or File Open Recent to open the file for Register EPC Premitigated.plan. So, after analyzing our distribution histogram, we have found that to attain an 80% level of confidence for our project completion, we're going to be 113 days late. This is unacceptable, so we need to find ways to mitigate the schedule. So select Reports Tornado Graph from the top menu or click on the tornado icon in the top toolbar. This will bring up the tornado chart for the entire project. It ranks sensitivity, criticality, cruciality, and schedule sensitivity index values. So what do these different functions mean? As a rule of thumb, when we look at the bars for duration and cost sensitivity, these are correlation metrics. So the higher the percent, the greater impact or driving impact on the schedule. Moving on to criticality index, the bars represent the time that different activities have spent on the critical path. For our model, we will see that 11 of the activities have spent 100% of their time on the critical path. So we may need to have another look at their duration uncertainties. Duration cruciality is obtained by multiplying the duration sensitivity by the duration criticality. So it tells us how much impact was it having and how much time did the activity spend on the critical path. I don't really use this metric very much. Lastly, we have the Schedule Sensitivity Index. This option is good for providing the overview of the entire project. Now, I normally focus on the duration sensitivity when performing a risk analysis, because we are looking at drivers up to a specific milestone. So this is what we will use here. Let's have a look at the navigation of our tornado chart window. Firstly, if you double-click any of the tornado bars, you will bring up the associated activity in the Gantt chart. To return to the tornado chart, select Risk Tornado Graph, or simply select the tornado icon again from the top toolbar. The top pull-down menus contain all of our options such as copy and paste, formatting, exporting, etc. And we will come back to some of them as we progress. Now if you right-click anywhere in the graph pane, a window will pop up that gives you options for formatting the graph, graph font or layout. You can also copy the graph, copy graph and statistics, and export the graph data. Lastly, you can customize your graph layout to suit specific requirements. Click Format Graph and a formatting window will open. You can also open this format window by double-clicking in the graph pane. Leave the radio button selected for the top option. Apply settings to Schedule Sensitivity Index Tornado Graph. This is the most normal setting. Now select the Filtering tab. Here you will be able to select the types of tasks to be included in the tornado chart. Since we are only looking at task duration sensitivity, we only need to select normal tasks. The other types of tasks will not affect the project completion. Note that in some circumstances, the 3 tasks on the right may be grayed out. These tasks only become available when the model is built from the risk register. The filter option in the lower part of the window provides options to select criteria for the number of results to display. The top 2 options are selected by default, but you may wish to ignore negative values as well. Now select the tab for drawing options. Here you can change the colors of the tornado chart. At the bottom of this window, there is an option to normalize percentages. When you look at your tornado bars, there is often the misconception that the percentages should add up to 100%. This is not the case. If you want to display your bars as percentages in relation to each other, select Normalize Percentages. They are only normalized when displayed in the tornado chart and not when they are displayed in the Gantt chart. Click Cancel to close this window. Now if you right-click in the Statistics pane, a window will pop up that gives you options for formatting, displaying, and copying information. Click anywhere in the graph to close this pop-up. What we want to do is look at the drivers leading up to our project completion, but this graph is for the entire project. So close the graph by clicking Cancel. Then highlight activity A011, Project Completion, and right-click your mouse. From the pop-up menu, select Show Drivers, Logical Predecessors, and the tornado chart for the project completion will open. So what do we know so far? We are 113 days late, and we need to find the reason for this. Let's initially focus on the top 4 activities in the tornado chart, because they are the largest drivers. You'll notice that some of the percent sensitivities are in bold type. This is because they have risks linked to them. At the bottom of the window, on the left, you'll see 2 display mode radio buttons. Click on the Risks button, and the tornado chart will change to display the risks in order of sensitivity. Click on the Tasks display mode again. The 2 main drivers are site mobilization and contract process, so we should look at these activities first. Double-click on the site mobilization bar, and the Gantt chart window will open, with the site mobilization selected. You will immediately note that it is linked to a risk event. Fabrication contractor goes bust. However, this risk has been set at 0% chance of a 3 to 6 day duration, so it is unlikely to impact the task duration. However, we can see that the duration uncertainty for site mobilization has been set to VA, very aggressive. This will cause a significant impact, so we may need to decide if we should modify the duration uncertainty range for this activity. Now let's go back to the tornado chart by clicking the tornado icon in the top bar. The next activity that we could investigate will be contract process. We will look at ways of mitigating our schedule in the next lesson. So in this lesson, we learned how to navigate and understand the tornado chart. In the next lesson, we will learn how to navigate and understand the distribution analyzer.